Hello and welcome to this episode of SBJ Live. I'm Dan Kaufman with Sports Business Journal. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go over some very quick logistics as people start to enter the room here, and then I will turn it over to our moderator and our panelists. If this is your first episode of SBJ Live, thank you so much for joining us here. We want to note at the outset that in looking over the attendees for this episode, this might be our most diverse, geographically speaking, episode that I've ever seen. We've got folks joining us from, the list is long, but I'll go through a few. Norway, Germany, Sweden, India, Iran, New Zealand, Mexico, Spain, Switzerland, Israel, Czech Republic, Chile, Romania, Peru, Slovakia, Thailand, South Sudan, and of course, North America, US, and Canada. So thank you all for joining. I'm not that surprised. This is a very, very important subject, globally speaking, for everyone, and it's one that certainly is very interesting for us at Sports Business Journal. And that subject is this. This is the title of today's episode: How AI and Computer Vision Power Automation from Biomechanical Analysis to Content Creation. Before I turn it over to our panelists, the logistical things I want to go over are this. We want your engagement and interaction, right? Those of you who have been here before on an episode of SBJ Live, you know that we don't just talk to you. We want you to talk back to us and to communicate. So there's two ways that we ask you to do that. One is through the chat feature. There's a little bubble on the right-hand side where you can see some folks are already saying hello. Please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you're coming from. Tell us what you're interested in. You can throw whatever you want in there. And then if you see people who you know, say hello to them as well. We really encourage that type of engagement. Two, there is a questions bubble right next to the chat bubble. That's where we want your questions. Don't wait until the end to submit questions. Submit them right away if you've got them, or submit them when they pop into your head, because there's an upvote feature that we like to use where you can upvote questions that you want to make sure that Joe, our moderator, gets to. And we will not have a specific Q&A time at the end. So throw your questions in now, upvote the ones that you want to make sure that we get to, and Joe will weave them into the conversation. That is the extent of my logistics. I'm going to turn it over now to our panel. It's my pleasure to welcome to the SBJ Live stage Masa Kabayama with Uplift Labs, Dan Pesce with WSC Sports, and Dave Shapiro from Pixellot. Joe Lemire from Sports Business Journal is our moderator. Joe, the floor is yours. Thank you.
All right, Dan, thank you kindly. And thanks to each of our panelists. So great to have you on board for what I'm sure will be a great conversation. And to start, what Dan said is hardly enough of an introduction. So I want to give each of you the floor for 2 or 3 minutes to talk a little bit more about your personal and company background, and to cue the leaders, our listeners and viewers into what to expect during the session. We'll start with you, Masa.
Morning, everybody, or good afternoon, and thanks for having me. So just a little bit of background. I was very fortunate to be part of very innovative global technology companies that introduced products that were category defining, such as at Apple. As director of education, I helmed the launch of the iPad with my team in Japan. And then as head of Tesla in Japan, I had the opportunity to launch the Model S and kind of scale sales and marketing there as well. In fact, a little side note, had a few months at Apple to help prepare for the launch of the iPad, but at Tesla, it was just a matter of a few weeks. So it was truly ludicrous mode. But I think you could say that my passion area is really, how do you identify emerging technologies that have the ability to scale, but yet have a net positive effect for society? So that's why I'm really excited what we're doing at Uplift. What we do is we use AI to essentially unlock biomechanics to optimize performance and prevent injuries from the professional to the everyday athlete. So if you think of it as the way Whoop and Aura essentially democratized everyday biometrics, for recovery, sleep monitoring, heart rate variability, we believe we're doing that in terms of providing accessibility to biomechanics, via ubiquitous devices like iPhones or iPads. So essentially, we like to think it's like having a sports performance lab and staff in your pocket.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks so much. And Dave, over to you.
Yeah, great to be on with everybody here. My background, not quite as impressive as Masa. I can't say that I worked on the iPad or the Tesla Model S, but I've spent my entire career, about 23 years so far, in the youth and high school sports industry. I worked for 12 years at Positive Coaching Alliance, which is a national nonprofit with the mission of better athletes, better people. Opened offices in about 16 different cities across the United States and grew to be a leader in the youth sports industry. Then from there, spent 4 years as the CEO of Steel Sports, which was a public company that owned and operated camps, facilities, et cetera, in the youth sports marketplace. And then I've been the president at Pixellot North America for the last 5 years. Pixellot, what we're doing is democratizing sports production. So when you think of sports production, most people imagine multiple cameramen on a field, the truck that drives in with the editing crew and graphics crew. And so in order to have that type of production, it obviously takes a lot of resources. So therefore, production traditionally was only done for very high revenue sports. So college football, for example, men's and women's college basketball. The other sports were mostly forgot about, and downstream was forgot about. And so where we've really focused is on the second tier professional leagues, small colleges, high schools, and even into youth sports. And I think if you ask most people what the most important game to them is, they're usually going to say the game that their child is playing in, whether they're playing t-ball or they're playing up through college sports. And so what we do is really make it possible for these type of games to have an ESPN type of production. The cost of our production is usually 5 to 10% of traditional production. And so what it's really done is open up the amount of events that can be produced. Today, Pixellot's producing over 200,000 games a month. So, if you break that down, that's more than 7,000 games every single day. That just simply wouldn't be possible from a cost perspective using traditional production. And so artificial intelligence has really made this whole market become possible.
And even more in February, right? And now over to Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, and appreciate everybody jumping on to view us. So I'm Dan Pesh. I'm representing WSC Sports. I've spent about the last 10 years of my career within various sports tech startups, many of which have ranged from video analysis and data analysis all the way to camera systems similar to like the Pixellot camera systems, and now most recently here with WSC Sports. So at WSC, I work in our North American office. We have about 35 of us that focus on all of our clients here in the United States and Latin America. And I'm in the business development team, and we run most of our relationships, out of that. WSC, kind of who we are and what we do is we are a sports technology firm that has an AI platform that automatically creates sports highlights at scale to be distributed to all of our customers' digital platforms. So as of today, we work with over 350 sports rights holders, allowing them to open up distribution of all of their content, right? So that can range from the NBA, where they're creating content, they're sending it to social media platforms, to their app. That could be, YouTube TV, who is creating unique concepts like catch-up highlights and utilizing WSC to power that. So as a business, that's our focus, is content distribution, content creation, and how do we empower our rights holders to do more of that.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And so just even at the outset, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, artificial intelligence is certainly a well-discussed topic out there. And obviously there are many different sort of sub-disciplines within it. We're focusing primarily on computer vision, but even there are different techniques underlying it and being paired with machine learning and deep learning. To go around the horn again, starting with Masa once more, what techniques are you using and how has it evolved in recent years?
Yeah, absolutely. So the area that we basically play in is human movement performance and movement health. And so specifically in our area, what you had seen in early days is something called 2D pose estimation. I'm sure many people here on the call will know what that is, but it's basically looking at video and looking at 2D key points that track mostly like the elbows or the knees. So these are really good for essentially like frontal plane basic movements, like tracking a squat, like how many sets or reps did you do? But for more complicated sports performance movements, for example, like a golf swing, a baseball pitch, or basketball free throw, these are complex because you're dealing with rotational movements. So it's sort of, the industry's evolved from 2D pose estimation to really how do you calculate accurately depth and position of an athlete's key points? In other words, how do you generate 3D? So this is sort of the new arms race, if you will, and excuse the pun. And what I think is really exciting is that the sort of first pioneers or the first waves that tried to solve this problem, and maybe a little bit incumbents today, have kind of multi-camera rig systems that are in like a sports lab environment. And so you ask the athlete to go there, put on wearable markers, or you have these multi-million dollar kind of camera systems, and it's accurate, but it's immobile. So I think the true opportunity lies where how do you capture athletes in their most natural movement settings, whether it's in game or in practice. And I think, and some of my colleagues on the call today, are doing immense things around that, from instant replays to what we're trying to crack the code is understanding the underlying biomechanics that led to that awesome shot.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Dave?
Yeah, so Pixellot's been around for about 10 years now. And when we first started, we were strictly using computer vision to produce sports events. And computer vision is kind of the classic approach where decisions are made based on the background that it's seeing, the moving actions. When we look at a sports event, the players and ball, if something's round, we classify that as a ball. If it's a bigger blob, that's classified as a player. So then we look at a problem and then verbally explain through instructions in the code that we're writing what the computer should be doing in those situations. And so, when we first started, it was 100% computer vision, no AI. And then over the last 10 years, we've slowly, as we've gotten more data, moved to more AI models. And so in AI, it's a different approach, right? We find the ball, we put in 1 million pictures of what a basketball or a soccer ball or a football might look like, and then build the network or the brain with all kind of features about the ball. So the computer knows exactly what a ball looks like. And so obviously that's going to be more precise because it's being done with a lot more data. And so it can perform much better than computer vision. However, early on, we couldn't have done that because we didn't have enough video and data to be able to plug into those models. And so over the last 6 years, we've really been moving more to AI, using machine learning and now really deep learning. And it's not just production that we're using the AI for, it's also highlights that are based on AI.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Dan?
Yeah. So not too dissimilar to Dave's overview, right? But with WSC, we're using, computer vision and a combination of that and machine learning, right? So ultimately what our product is doing is we are creating what we call a perfect highlight for every event in a game. So we work within 24 different sports currently, anywhere from basketball to poker. Each sport, our AI has to learn the sport specific, right? And be able to create that content. So that perfect highlight is not only that basis of what it is, it's also, the fact that we're creating in and out points as if a human editor had done it themselves, right? We're not cutting off commentary. We're making sure it's the perfect highlight for that sport. We're assessing a rating system based off of every sport of 1 through 5. 5 within the sport of basketball being the game winner by Luka Doncic, and 1 being the non-highlight worthy piece of content. So that's the core of our technology. And really from the computer vision side, right, we're doing whether it's like OCR and identification of what's happening on the field or on the screen or on whatever is the feed that we're getting. And then when we think about the core, which is storytelling, that's where more it's the modeling, right? So it's this idea that you go into WSC system and you tell our system, I want to see the last 10 made baskets by Luka Doncic that were 5 stars. 2 clicks of a button, our technology is going to create that and be able to distribute that content at scale for you. So we're constantly evaluating the content that we have in our system to be able to tell a better story for the specific highlight that we create.
I don't think I was aware that poker was in your portfolio of sports.
It's the newest. I think it's the newest one. We got a couple on the horizon, but that's one that's certainly one of our newer ones.
Well, I guess the more substantive question is, how many, of the different sports, like how long does it take to sort of train the models to be able to, ingest a new sport?
Yeah. So it's a good question. We typically say it takes 6 to 8 weeks, but that's not a model that's going to be, fully running day one within a sport, right? So if we look at the sport of basketball, we've been a company since 2012. The NBA has been a client of ours since around 2014. We now, for the most part, have not mastered, but we understand the sport of basketball significantly deeper based off of our modeling and what we're able to create and having great partners like the NBA. So if we take in a sport of poker, right, we're looking at, what's the data that we can derive? So is there a data feed maybe that we can use to help us identify the perfect clip? Or maybe it's data that we're actually pulling from, like we said, OCR or the camera. So when we go on the endeavor of a new sport, it's normally about 6 to 8 weeks to start it, and then it's mastering it over time.
Mm-hmm. This might be a good question for everyone else. Dave, how many sports does Pixellot cameras recognize? And again, what's that uptick that to train the model?
Yeah, so we actually have 17 different sports. We don't have poker like WSC, but yeah, pretty much every major sport. We started out with the sports on a rectangular field just because the models can be more similar there. But more recently, we launched baseball and softball, diamond sports, and also cricket. And there it's a much different logic that we're teaching because we have multiple angles. So we have a camera behind home plate, camera behind center field. And so we had to train the model on when do you switch angles of the camera. On a rectangular field, our viewpoint is always from midfield. And so we have anywhere from 3 to 4 cameras at midfield. It creates a very high quality panorama, 180-degree view of that field. And then we're zooming in, panning back and forth based on the AI models.
Mm-hmm. And Masa, how many, obviously there's quite a bit of similarity in human motion, but there's going to always be that sport specific skill. So same question to you.
Yeah. And before that, Dan, if you ever develop an in-app audio card counting, app, please let me know for poker. Sorry. So I think I'll answer it this way. Essentially, our primary product is called Uplift Capture. That entails having 2 iPhones. Imagine these are iPhones or 2 iPads that are placed at 90 degrees from the athlete. And that's essentially movement agnostic. So you can basically collect any type of rotational movement or any movement, actually, like a jump, even squats. Like we have movement assessments as well. And you can get 3D, accurate biomechanical metrics on that. So we're essentially movement agnostic. However, as both Dave and Dan had mentioned, the underlying insights is really important. So we have specifically automated reports that are sport specific. So at the moment, they're sport specific to baseball for hitting and pitching, for a number of movement assessments like jumps, squats, lunges, as well as softball. So for our end-to-end platform experience, we are much focused in certain verticals. But in terms of the type of movement, think of it again as a portable lab. It's really being able to capture any type of movement, as long as you have somebody in the organization that can interpret, the data to the way they'd like to utilize that.
Okay, and I know your company was in the NBA Launchpad program, and you mentioned free throw shooting before. Is that how far has the basketball product matured, and is it primarily free throw shooting at this point, or what's the latest?
Yeah, so we were excited to be part of the NBA Launchpad last year as part of the first cohort. We learned, just like any early stage startup learns, that when is the right market readiness? And I think the Launchpad experience has been great. We were selected in the category of elite youth player development. So we work with the overseas NBA academies, essentially trying to understand at the biomechanical level what makes a good shot or make or a missed shot. And it was fascinating because if there's a 50% cutoff line for drafting or for scouts, some of these players, when they're making it, it's like at 55%, but when they're missing it, it's unfortunately like below 40%. So if you can just work on the areas when they're missing the shots on the biomechanical level, they get above the fold, right, above the line. So those were some of the insights. One of the things that we think post Launchpad is real time is a big ask from the teams. So, and also instead of having 2 devices, can you get it on 1 device? So we've been in R&D since then, and I think in a few months or so there'll be some exciting things in our pipeline that we'll be really excited to announce.
Okay, awesome. I'd love to know, just to give a sense to everyone about like what's possible in 2023. What, with these AI and computer vision techniques, what is maybe a milestone you've reached recently, or some other accomplishment? And maybe we'll start with Dan on this one.
Sure. So a couple that come to mind, like right off the bat, I think starting from a business perspective for WSC specifically, we've seen a significant amount of growth from a business perspective, both with our partners as well as internally. We're over 400 employees now, so we're growing quite a bit, and we're continuing to move down in that direction. When I look at some of like the milestones that we've seen from a product perspective, or new products that we've launched that we're seeing really helping the market. We were fortunate enough this last year to win a Sport Emmy along with YouTube TV for our catch up to key plays feature that we helped create with them. So if you're to go on YouTube TV and you're to enter a specific game, it's going to ask you if you'd like to watch it live or if you'd like to catch up with key plays. And essentially what that is on the back end is WSC creating a piece of content in real time to the moment in which the consumer enters that experience, right? So if Joe were watching a baseball game, you enter in the third inning, you're going to get a highlight that's specific, up to that point. If I enter in the seventh, I'm going to get a more robust highlight that's specific to that point. So we're using storytelling, with our partners to do that. That's one really cool one. And, I think with groups like the NBA and ESPN, and to see all of that they're able to do from a content perspective, utilizing our system and their growth in views and all of that, that's been a pretty exciting part of what we're doing as well.
And with the baseball pitch clock, there's a little more urgency to get those clips done and ready. But actually, the one other feature I'd like to follow up with you, Dan, I had a chance to speak with La Liga recently, and I know they were very bullish on, they want to make sure that it's very social friendly video vertical video to make sure everyone's friendly. And was it the Magic Crop tool? What's the latest? What can you tell everyone about that?
Yeah, most definitely. So, WSC over the last couple of years has started to see the shift, like I'm sure many of you have, into this concept of vertical video, right? So if you look at the NBA app, you look at the La Liga app, they're really trying to meet the consumer where they're viewing content on social platforms, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, and a lot of that in that vertical format. So what WSC has created for at this point, about a third of our sports, our bigger sports like soccer and basketball, we've created the ability to automatically crop to the ratio in which you're sending to a platform. So what we've done through our modeling is we've taken thousands and millions of hours of basketball and identified with our partners what are the cropping sections, and what are the points of interest, if you will, for that specific sport, so we can crop it to the way that a consumer would want to engage in it. So that's a really cool technology that we've had live with a lot of our partners. We branded Magic Crop, and we're pushing that out to a lot more because we're seeing the market. There's a need for it, and people are really engaging in it.
Yeah, awesome. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, so a couple of the milestones that we had this year. The biggest one is 2 million games produced in 2023. That's just huge growth, over 50% growth year over year. We now have 40,000 fields across the world that have our fixed installation technology. So that means it's installed at a high school field or a professional stadium, and we're producing every single game on that court or field. We also launched automatic highlights for basketball and soccer. And we're even doing that with the small mobile camera you see behind me here, the Pixellot Air. So if you take that to your son or daughter's soccer game after the game, you'd be able to see every shot on goal, every set play, every goal scored. In basketball, you'd see every basket scored by player number. So number 12's baskets, number 18's baskets, etc. And then the last thing that I'd mention is a big new product launch. For us to launch a new product takes years and years of work. So we launched what's called the S3, which is our new fixed installation product that goes onto fields. It's about 50% better resolution than our previous camera. Also is just a much easier installation process. We're able to move the cameras mechanically from a remote location. So if something gets moved, you don't have to send somebody back on site, which decreases support time and costs as well.
I hope the Air is recording so it can clip the highlights of all your best talking points today.
It's all focused on you, Joe.
Oh,
Keep zooming into you as the star.
Hope I'm not too blurry. Masa, one question over to you.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate working with today 12 MLB teams for hitting and pitching analysis, whether it's in the batting cage, the bullpen, or on the field. This past June, we announced our collaboration with the MLB, which I want to double tap in a second. And then, as you mentioned, Joe, the work with the NBA Launchpad last year. We're utilized over 2 million golfers every year go through our system at Golf Tech, the world's largest golf instruction company. And now, as part of that road to democratization, we work with over 20 NCAA colleges and academies. And so our unique kind of athlete data set also is growing by the day. But in terms of the MLB, this is really exciting for us because, we've been piloting and working with them for over a year. We brought, and I think maybe one of the first examples of AI utilized in scouting for college level and high school level players. So we were there at the draft combine in Arizona. We're just wrapping up together with the summer league and then looking at now international combine. So this was really exciting for us. I think some of the things we learned through that, which I want to give a shout out to the product engineering and AI teams, is really the thing that makes our hearts sing is really the usage and usability of the product and what we hear back from our users. So UX is really important to have that seamless, easy to use experience. And so just a number of new feature sets we launched into landscape mode. So these are great for like pitching, kind of horizontal based movements. Another one is manual distance entry. Right now, our 2 iPhones or iPads auto calibrate. So basically you really don't need to calibrate. However, some batting cages, right, like minor league affiliates might be really tight in width and space. So we have now the flexibility added that you can put the tripods in different positions and distances. One thing I think is really important to note, because there's a lot of talk, right, with AI replacing humans and people. Like I live in San Francisco and I had my first driverless rideshare ride, and it was actually pretty magical, but kind of scary at the same time, but kind of cool. But our intent is not to replace the scout or the coach. I really want to emphasize this. There's so much that the coach and the scout or a movement professional brings, but it's really to assist them with bionic eyes. So to capture data that's really hard or impossible for the naked eye to catch. And just an example of that is one of the rollouts in our reporting is something called forearm flyout. And I'm sure many of us here, were shocked a few days ago when Shohei Ohtani, right? He has a UCL tear and needs to do Tommy John surgery. So what we do is we flag in our reports, if you threw 20 times and out of the 20, let's say 65% of the time, we're seeing forearm flyout happening. That's really hard to catch, with the naked eye. So that's something that, we can flag to help, again, for our mission to reduce injuries and optimize performance.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. And I want to encourage everybody in the audience to submit your questions, and we'll start getting into some of the audience questions now. Tomek asks, thinking about team sports, what is the metric, sensor, technique that you would wish for to get to the next level of analysis and precision in your different applications? Actually, maybe Masa, you're probably the most intently on the performance side of things. What else? How would you have any response to that? And maybe also I'm curious, would you ever pair with some sort of sensor, your technologies? Are there other integrations that are possible as well that could enhance it?
Yeah. So I'll kind of answer 2 ways. Because we work with organizations at the highest level of sport, and then now, in college and private academies, a lot of what we hear in feedback is they would love one platform to be able to access end to end. So input and output, what were the biomechanics that led to that ball flight, let's say, and then what's happening to the ball. And actually even the instrument is of great interest to us as well, like the bat or the club. So in terms of, to your point, I think there are opportunities, and we remain open in terms of partnerships for third-party companies that do areas of excellence that we're not doing. So that's just kind of one example. And when you break down team sports, I mean, we really highlight and work with athletes kind of performance moments, if you will, right? That free throw, that shot, that pitch. And so it's kind of individual, even though the context is within a team sport. But I think it would be really cool eventually, and I was going to reserve this towards the end of the call, at the end of this panel, but we are working on some things that I think the gold rush, if you will, for biomechanics is like broadcast footage. if you can just take broadcast footage and get the same level of accuracy on your biomechanics, that you would do, that you can get in a sports lab live, that must mean something for a lot of people. So I think that would be really cool.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So one thing I would add to that, so at Pixellot, we're using AI not just to produce the game, but also then to produce statistics around the game. Like an advanced level box score, for example, we're doing that. Pixellot doesn't focus on the player performance or analysis side, which, up until most recently, that's really been done through sensors, right? You got companies like Catapult, et cetera, that have sensors that you wear to get, the highest speed you've run on the soccer pitch or distance traveled, et cetera. We have integrated with some innovative companies that are now using video. As long as the video is high enough quality, they're able to get some of that performance data based off of the video. So for example, we've partnered with another company in Israel called Track 160 that uses our camera, the S3, to get the video, and then they're able to provide a lot of that data that you would get using a sensor just from our video.
Oh, that's great. And then we have a question from Marcin about field hockey analysis and auto highlights. Is that one of the 17 sports for Pixellot, Dave?
That is. We actually do a lot of field hockey work in Europe, not quite as much in the US. But yes, we've got a unique algorithm for field hockey and automatic highlights as well.
Mm-hmm. And Dan, is field hockey one of your sports?
Actually, you stumped us. So that today is not one of the 24 sports that we support. But I'll say this: we've recently been fortunate enough to make a really big push into the college space. Right, what we're seeing, we've worked historically with conferences, ACC, Big Ten, and their digital networks. But now, as the advancement is happening around rights, and these colleges, I like to say, are becoming their own little media organizations in their own right. Right, so we've made a big push in creating content for colleges and field hockey, obviously being a big college focused sport in the NCAA. I don't think it's going to be far behind. So we'd love to discuss it.
Okay, great. And there's also one specifically for Masa about verifying the technology and the accuracy. How much effort have you put into that, and what can you share?
A lot. So I mentioned a little earlier that we have the pleasure of working with, at the moment, nearly half of the MLB teams. Every time we have a discussion with a new MLB team and we do the onboarding, during the trial period, they actually compare it to their internal lab systems. So it gets vetted 12 times so far internally before they move ahead. But at the same time, we're doing our own kind of third-party work with some universities, and we've had some already comparative studies that we provide. And we have one pretty groundbreaking one that's about to come out in a few months. So Joe, I'll send it to you first as a first look.
I would appreciate that. It seems like there's a few things coming.
Very important. I mean, these professional athletes, right? It matters to how many degrees, like a few degrees or the few centimeters, or I guess inches. Sorry, it really matters, and it affects their performance. So, absolutely, accuracy matters.
Mm-hmm. Great. And now we'll randomly pick Dave to be the first to answer this question. What are some of the existing limitations of AI?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, first, what you need to do is train the system. So, if you don't have a lot of data, then it's not going to be very accurate. So when you have a unique problem, sometimes that, for example, is easier to solve with computer vision versus AI. So it's those specific issues, I think, are some of the limitations. An example of that I'd give you is, our algorithm for basketball, for example, where we're following all the players and the ball and then zooming and panning in to where that action is taking place, right? Well, at the end of a game, most of the players aren't bunched together, right? You might have a full court pass. You think of like the Christian Laettner pass where everybody was in the back court. They throw that full court long pass and one guy's at the complete other end of the court. So that's like one of the things that initially was a challenge for us that didn't fit within the algorithm that we had built for basketball. Obviously, we caught it pretty early. And then once we had enough data around it, we could adjust to be able to solve for that. But that would be the main thing that I would speak to.
Mm-hmm. Dan?
Yeah, so this is actually something that Masa brought up earlier and is for I think all of us in the space, but I don't necessarily at WSC focus on like the limitations of AI. It's more around like the perception of our application of AI, right? And what I mean by that is, when we started as a business, AI was, it's been around, but it was still fairly new to the sports world and to the way that we were creating content, right? So I think there was this concept amongst our partners and prospects of the replacement, like, right? Are we going to have to replace an editor by using WSC? But what we've seen over the last 10 years is that it's actually not replacement at all. It's empowerment, right? So our partners that are utilizing us the most are utilizing our platform, and they're hiring more, right? And they're bringing on more people to create different types of content and different types of storytelling. So I think I try to focus at it through that lens is how do we continue to make more and more people comfortable around, AI coming into the sports space and empowering it and being that type of tool.
Joe, if I can just add one more thing to that, I completely agree with Dan's point there. For Pixellot, we feel like we're really creating jobs and creating a market because the games that we're covering weren't produced before. It's not like we're taking, the Angels versus the San Francisco Giants, and now we're producing that, and the people that we're working on that are gone. We're typically producing games that were not produced before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, good point. Masa, anything to add?
Yeah, so specifically to computer vision and specifically to human movement performance, there's sort of two things that come to mind. And it's not just probably us at Uplift, but anybody involved in the field who are trying to understand human movement performance. One is you have a lot of variability in real world scenarios. So what I mean by that is, for example, computer vision models are trained on specific data sets, but when they kind of struggle sometimes when they're exposed to real world variations. So an example of that could be like lighting conditions are dramatically different, right? You're not going to get much of any kind of tracking if you put your camera into the sun. Occlusions, right? Depending on the angle of where you place you set cameras, you might not be able to see a joint, so then that gets blurred. And of course, there's ways to mitigate that, like predictive analysis. Backgrounds, we come up with this a lot. We tell people, please don't wear nothing but black when you have a black wall behind you, because it's really hard for a computer vision to tell where are the joints, right? So there are manual ways of hacking that. Like, again, we ask them, please kind of try to wear some color contrast, but it's, tough. So we're also, continuously kind of train our models to be able to be more flexible in any kind of real world scenario. The second one is computational costs. So we process our videos in the cloud, especially when you're dealing with high resolution images. And I'm sure maybe Dan and Dave, since you deal with processing, although I think it might be on-prem or on-site, but these, the facts that you have to spin up, multiple GPUs in the cloud, when our organizations are utilizing Uplift Capture, and the more we move towards real time, that gets prohibitively expensive. So the only thing here that I guess I think about daily is, not daily, but once in a while, is, man, if I invested in NVIDIA 10 years ago or even earlier this year.
Yeah, no, well put. And actually, as a Pixellot founder, Galaz once told me, there's no such thing as the cloud. It's just someone else's computer, right?
I love that line.
Yeah. So we have come this far, 40 minutes into a panel about AI, and we have not yet uttered the phrase or term ChatGPT. And so certainly that has brought so much more attention to AI. And so sort of broadly speaking, generative AI is getting these headlines. How, if at all, can it complement what your company is already offering? Maybe go Dan to start this time.
Sure. The hope is quite a bit, I would say, from our perspective, right? I think I'll start with this. WSC, as we started, in many ways, we are a generative AI company, right? So what we're doing is we're using AI to create content that, generate content that people are using to, to send out and distribute. So what we found to be the most interesting is, over the last year or so, it's actually been, our partners, the ones that are coming to us and saying, WSC, what are you seeing in the space? Or, we've seen this recent breakthrough around commentary or maybe around brand recognition. How can we utilize that along with what you guys are creating in your system? So there's quite a bit of focus on our end around it. And I think there will continue to be a lot of focus. And how do we, utilize it to make our platform better and ultimately, create more content and help create more content for our partners.
And actually, speaking of commentary, I mean, do you like how much? I mean, do you do any AI narration at this point, or is that something that you're considering?
I think it's something that we're certainly looking into, as a business. As of today, right now, from our perspective, what we're creating is these forms of content. Again, we're taking the audio feeds directly from the broadcaster. We actually have a really cool brand new technology that flags music, like an audio compliancy for a lot of our leagues and our partners where we're being sued quite a bit of money for having music in the background. So we're utilizing AI to flag the music, detach the music from the asset, and then allow them to push the asset out. So not necessarily answering your question, but audio is certainly something that we focus on quite a bit and will continue to focus on.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. That was actually something that only in the last few weeks did I even realize was a major issue for a lot of rights holders. Dave, anything about generative AI and Pixellot?
Yeah, I think the opportunity around generative AI is enormous. And the way we think about it is how can we use generative AI to improve the user experience? And so there's a couple things that we've already started and have rolled out and that are in the pipeline. The first is I mentioned that we can produce a box score from a game. Well, when you have the box score of how many points, rebounds, etc., scored by a person, you can input that into something like a ChatGPT and get editorial content. So taking that box score and now having like a New York Times type of press release about that game. So we've already started doing that for some of our customers. We also are starting to use it to improve the quality of our highlights, to add graphics and other engagement pieces to the production that we're doing. And then a piece that we haven't started development on, but we certainly see as an opportunity is, Joe, what you were just talking about, is automatic commentators. And so right now we have remote commentary available. So somebody can be watching the stream and call it from a different part of the world or a different part of the country. But with some of the data that we've got coming through, we should be able to eventually have automatic commentary. Obviously not going to be quite to the level that you hear a game called in person right now, but we do think that's a big opportunity.
Sure, and we're starting to see, just since it's very topical and timely, with IBM and the USDA are doing AI commentary for a lot of their audio clips, their highlights. Not quite the real time that I think people would want for live sports, but it's a starting place. Masa?
Yeah, just the other day, I was talking to one of our advisors on our advisory board, who's the chief product officer at Cohere. And for those who don't know, Cohere is kind of a main rival competitor to OpenAI. And we were joking that more and more companies are soon going to be needing to hire CPOs, which is Chief Prompt Officer. So yeah, I think Gen AI is just going to be as ubiquitous as the internet or whatnot, right? Again, specifically to the era that we play in. So, when we work with professional sports teams, and if you think about the pro athlete, they're very gifted naturally, but they're also gifted because they have, the access to the top-notch, technology, experts with, insights that help them stay, healthy, injury-free as possible, and then, of course, to optimize the performance. But we all know this is not readily accessible to the everyday athlete. But one of the key things that aren't really, when you think about it, accessible is there's so much raw data that's being collected at the professional level of sport, whether it's in-game, during practice from multiple wearables or optical, devices like, including what we do. And like, how do you translate all that massive raw data sets, right? And so there's a lot, like, for example, Bloomberg News, those guys are, they have a proprietary data set of all this news and understanding, all the kind of annual reports from companies, but they're not necessarily integrating, right? They're building kind of their own LLM models. And that's because they're sitting on this major data set. So I think that is kind of, when we think about it, a great area of interest. But how do you partner and utilize, external, Gen AI companies? And for us specifically, there's 3 areas of keen interest. One is like personalization, right? Like, instead of looking at charts and graphs, can you just run a quick query and say, hey, your left knee tends to rotate inward when you squat. So you might want to change that up. The second one is visual interpretations. Again, without having to look at charts or data, like wouldn't it be cool to just have a heat map to kind of see, where in your body that you might need to intervene for further strength and conditioning, and also export that into a VR or AR, environment. So you can have your, avatar right there, and you can just walk around it with your new Apple, Vision, headsets for anyone who can afford it. And then the third one is suggested intervention. So similar to the first one, but like, it's like having, again, a little bit like a trainer in your pocket, being able to recommend exercises or stretch, or techniques to help modify and improve, your hip flexion or reduce your knee strain and things like that. So basically, in our world, we believe Gen AI has such immense possibilities to bridge the gap between raw data and actionable insights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. A few more audience questions to get to. Alexander's asking about the modern capabilities of mobile platforms to perform computer vision tasks in sports and fitness. Certainly Masa's product is very much dependent on that already, but I'm curious maybe for Dave, what kind of camera power is necessary for a Pixellot product? Is there any possibility of being able to use a smartphone somewhere down the road?
Yeah, very good question. So 2 years ago, we came out with the Pixellot Air, the product behind me, which fits in one hand. You take it from field to field, can put it on a tripod. And that's really opened up the market, because so much of at least youth sports in this country is played where you're bouncing from field to field every weekend. You don't have one home field like you do in a high school setting or the college setting. We have started to do some research and beta testing on using the mobile phone for production. And I do think that we'll soon have a product out there that is based on that. Now, it won't be for bigger fields. That's the limitation right now with like soccer or lacrosse or American football, for example. The field is so big that one camera or even the 3 cameras on the new iPhone just doesn't have a wide enough angle, even if you add a fisheye, to have the resolution that's needed to produce that big of a field. But in basketball, volleyball, futsal, the cameras today on the current iPhones and Pixels, et cetera, are strong enough to do production there. So that's one of the new products that we'll likely be launching soon.
Yeah, fascinating. And then we have a question from Megan asking about a video analysis content pipeline for MMA that will require tagging of very specific attributes via bounding and key skeletons. I'd assume that we would need fixed 360 cameras for Masa or for anyone. Do you have any thoughts on if this would be possible with variable cameras? I mean, I imagine occlusion is an issue on joints with MMA, but what do you think?
No, bingo. We've had some similar kind of inquiries. Joe, you said it. I mean, occlusion is going to be very difficult, especially in these type of, from wrestling to combat type sports, where it's really going to be hard for the computer vision to realize which elbow belongs to who, or where is that elbow, especially when you're kind of like in a pretzel on the floor. But it isn't to say that there probably are techniques. It just requires a lot of training on the data side. But if there is that opportunity, I think that could be something immensely attractive. I mean, it's clear that the Middle East is throwing a lot of money behind it. So again, not to quote somebody that I used to work at Apple, but said follow the money. So that could be something that potentially is something. But again, at the same time, we also have we can't boil the ocean as well.
Sure. Well, great. Well, we're getting near the end of the panel, so I want to go out on one final question for each of you, and that's what's on your product roadmap. I know Dave just sort of gave one example of that, so maybe we'll let you start and see if there's anything else. But sort of also just broadly, like where is AI headed? Like, what do you, even if it's not already on the roadmap, what do you think might be possible in 2, 3, 4, 5 years or so?
Yeah, so I do think mobile phones will be a big piece of it. That obviously reduces the hurdle for so many people to produce content. If you don't have to buy new hardware and you can use, the phone that's in your pocket to produce. And then I think really as I talked about a little bit around generative AI, is the user experience, I think, is what we're going to see improved a lot around editorial content, commentating, graphics, etc. I think there's a lot of opportunities to now take this produced game that we're making and even add to the look and feel so that it feels even more like an ESPN game or something you would see on linear TV. And the last thing that I would add is I just think this is a very, very exciting time for everybody in sports technology. I think COVID kind of ramped up the adoption for a lot of leagues and teams, all the way from high school sports up through professional sports. And so you just had more people adopting new technology, and I think it stayed. That was the big question during COVID is, will this adoption stay? And I think so many of the consumers and businesses were trained to do business in a different way. They found more efficient and even better ways to do things. And so it's just an exciting time, I think, for the sports market, the sports technology market across the world right now.
Mm-hmm. Dan?
Yeah, completely agree with that, Dave. This is certainly an exciting time. I think for us, from a roadmap perspective, the core to our roadmap has always been content creation and distribution, right? So our partners have made it, clear as to this concept of wanting to personalize that journey, quite a bit. And at WSC, we believe that we are positioned to be, that tool, probably the easiest tool to do it with, to personalize based off of our rules and the way that we create content. So we've really leaned into that. I think one of the things you mentioned, La Liga, earlier, and vertical video is just a piece of it, right? Automating vertical video. The second piece is we recently built an SDK, which is the front end to what their ecosystem we call in-app stories. So when you go into the app, you're able to see, this very lean forward story style, concept that you'll see on Instagram. You'll have, the TikTok style, and then all of that, is running now, not only being powered by WSC on the back end, being the hose as we historically are, but also now being the front end and helping with our partners to build that type of experience. So I think for us, that's really where we're going to continue to focus, is building applications around, personalizing the consumer journey, and doing a lot of what Dave said is, utilizing graphics, building assets that people really want to see, and we can help them create.
Awesome. And I guess that means final word to Masa.
For sure, especially being the newbie on this panel where you guys have been at this for much longer. I think if we follow kind of other industry trends, like you think about a factory environment or warehouses, it's, kind of going from automation to insights, right? And similar, exactly as Dave and Dan mentioned, this is a renaissance for sports technology companies and the whole world of sports. And particularly where the intersection that we sit in, we're really moving from phase one, which is automation. Like, how do we just set it by setting up 2 iPhones or iPads, capture the data, send it to the cloud, in a few minutes, boom, you have your kind of insights. But how do you also empower the coaching experience and move that forward? One of the things I kind of teased it a little bit earlier is we're very, very interested in the broadcast space. We've already been actually 2 years in R&D, taking various broadcast footage and being able to extract pretty accurate, 3D kinematics from that. So just as an example, this can, if you think about the PGA Tour or, something golf on TV, oftentimes you see with TrackMan or, other ball trackers, what happened to the ball, right? What was the apex? What was the carry, the ball speed, or baseball exit velocity? But you have no idea, what did the athlete do to produce that home run or that beautiful, 300-yard shot, or actually more, probably 350 or something. And I think that's immensely interesting, right? Because it can create the opportunity for much richer storytelling experiences in a much kind of deeper human level narrative, and also engage with, fans at a much kind of deeper level for the athletes that they're passionately following. And not to put a plug, but I also think there could be interesting opportunities, Dan and Dave, to chat on the side too around this as well. But yeah, I think that is a huge unlock, right? Can you imagine all the historic broadcast data that exists out there, from professional sports to college sports to even, your youth athlete iPhone data? Anyone who cracks the code in collecting that and be able to garner insights, I think is sitting pretty.
Man, hello everyone. What a fascinating educational, engaging panel. Thank you. A round of applause, a virtual round of applause, whatever it might be for you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. To the audience, I really hope you enjoyed it. I will give a quick plug. If you are not a Sports Business Journal subscriber, you got to subscribe. You'll get this and much, much more from Joe and all our other reporters. We have a specific tech subscription, SBJ Select Tech. It's affordable, it's annual rate, and it's well worth the money that you put into it. So you'll get an email follow-up to this that will have a link to that, and I hope you all subscribe if you don't subscribe already. We do this nearly every week with SBJ Live. We've got one next week that is going to be focused on the launch of the NFL season, moderated by SBJ reporter Ben Fisher. And then we got a couple more after that. So make sure you take a look at that calendar, and we'd love to see you back on the next episode of SBJ Live. Masa, Dave, Joe, Dan, thank you so much for your time. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you all. Appreciate the time.